The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Whitting.
How would you feel if you had verifiable proof of supernatural abilities gained from 3 NDEs, and yet few mainstream scientists were willing to study the facts? What can NDEers do to provoke scientific studies of the psychic gifts NDEs can provide? Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Whitting. Our guest today is supposed to be Cherylee Black, who has had 3 powerful near-death experiences at key times in her life. But we're having some problems reaching her, and so I thought I might just generally talk about some of the problems that she has encountered in her dealings with trying to get research done on the experiences that she's had. Now, to find out more about what her experiences have been, you can go to 2 previous interviews that we did with her. One was January 27th of this year, and the following Monday, we talked to her on February 3rd. She has had 3 incredible experiences, and the gifts that she's received from these experiences are quite remarkable. She's had psychokinetic abilities and gifts of prophecy, not that she can prophesy at will, but she brought back memories of things that she had seen on the other side that have proven to be true. How do we get people who are mainstream scientists, people who are interested in studying consciousness, to examine these situations and come up with some idea of what's actually going on? It's really been a problem because it's considered to be such a weird spiritual topic, and as you know, science doesn't like to mess with anything that evokes religious beliefs. So it's been a real problem, and I am hoping that we can get Cherylee on the phone to talk about this. But if we can't do it this time, we'll get her on a future show. Now, because of this, I'm going to go into the archives and see if I can find a couple of NDE stories that you might like to hear about. This is from the IANS archives. It was called Velvety Dark Stillness. My childhood was plagued by teeth problems. This is from the International Association of Near-Death Study files. This was a monthly NDE as produced on November 19th, 2010 from their website. My childhood was plagued by teeth problems, necessitating several extractions under gas. At age 26, the dentist advised me to have the remaining teeth removed, 4 at a time. The first session was uneventful, just the familiar gas-induced chaotic dreams. The second session was something else. It was a revelation that changed my life. It was a timeless state, so I don't know how long I had been unconscious before I realized that I had left my body on the couch and was looking down at it through the ceiling. It meant no more to me than an old coat that I had discarded. There was no fear or confusion, just a wonderful weightlessness and freedom. I was aware of having a form of some kind that was not physical, but felt perfectly natural. I turned my attention away from the scene below, which seemed to be receding and getting smaller, and found myself in a velvety, dark stillness. I wanted to move through it, but couldn't. I was blocked. And then I felt a protective yet powerful presence, and words came to me in a voice that was not a voice. I have no way to describe it. Telepathy is as close as I can get. It said, "It's not your time. You must go back." I didn't want to, even though at that time, I had everything to live for. I was newly engaged, buying a house, and my career was taking off. I began asking questions about life, death, heaven, and the universe, such things that I had never given a moment's thought to before. I was not at all religious. The answers came immediately. Volumes of information were conveyed in just 2 to 6 words, and this is where it becomes impossible to explain, because the answers were only clear at a level of understanding at which the mind is out of its depth. Each reply ended with, "You must go back," and finally, "You must fight to go back." There was a brief vision of shimmering grid of pulsating light, and then I was back, stunned and surrounded by oxygen cylinders, a demented, swearing dentist, and people panicking in white coats. I was kept in a recovery room for several hours. For weeks afterward, I functioned on automatic pilot, a stranger on the planet filled with a homesickness that has stayed with me for 45 years and is powerful enough to have me in tears at times. It runs like an undercurrent just beneath the surface of my life. When I returned to the surgery to ask what had happened that day, the dentist refused to see me. The receptionist said rather nervously and obviously uneasy that I had been taken off the register and the work should be completed at a dental hospital. When I pressed her further, she told me there had been a problem with the second tooth, which was still intact, but before she could say more, the dentist called her away. Throughout the experience, I felt that I was in my natural element with an expansion of consciousness unachievable while in the body, and it began decades of research toward a deeper understanding. The result, gratitude for this life and this magnificently engineered body, an utter reverence for creation, and daily joy in being an eternal and infinite part of it. I have never attributed the experience to the gas. OBEs and NDEs were being reported long before anesthetics came on the scene. And that was an anonymous story from the files of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And of course, there are hundreds, thousands of stories that have been recorded, written down. There are millions of stories that have not been told. And it's really, we can't screw up the courage from the moment that we have had the experience to tell that story to other people. But of course, people will say, "Oh, don't." The doctors often will say it's just an effect of anesthesia, or you were hallucinating, or you had a dream. Family members will tell people, don't say that you saw Jesus. If you do, people will think you were crazy. The whole story of heaven is for real, about the little boy who saw Jesus, and how this Christian congregation couldn't accept the fact, even though, what is Christianity all about if not the accessibility of Jesus? Anyway, I guess we have time for a call-in, and our call-in number is 888-463-6748. If anyone would like to call up and tell us about a near-death experience they might have had, or if you have any questions at all about near-death experiences, that's 888-463-6748. In the meantime, let me see if I can find you another story. I'll tell you one that happened to me recently. In my work as a chaplain at a hospital here in Maine, I talk to many people day after day. I interview people in intensive care, people who've had heart attacks, people whose hearts have stopped. When they call a code blue at the hospital, it means that somebody has to be resuscitated. And I often wind up in my role as chaplain talking to them about it. And one of the things, of course, I have to ask them is, do you remember anything from the time when your heart stopped? And here's a story that I was told just a couple of weeks ago that really touched me. There was this fellow who had flatlined just before he hit the ground. He said he was able to dial 911, and so fortunately the ambulance was nearby, and that was a godsend for him, of course. But anyway, he told me that as his soul left his body, he saw this little dog waiting there, and it was the dog that he had lost 3 months before and loved dearly. In fact, he'd called him called the dog his little girl because, at first I thought he was talking about his daughter. No, it was this little dog. And he said, as my soul was leaving my body, I could reach out and almost picked her up. And then, they hit me with the paddles. We have a lot of, problems in the NDE world because we cannot get people to talk enough about their experiences. Do you realize if we had 15 million people, well, that's the estimate that a Gallup poll gave us back in the 90s of the number of Americans who've had near-death experiences. If we could get everybody to talk about their experiences, we would be, the whole nature of our understanding of this world and the next could be changed. It's just phenomenal to me that it's the reticence, it's the embarrassment, it's the shyness, it's the vulnerability of the people who've had these experiences that keeps them from sharing something that is such a God-given gift that we have to be able to talk about these things. There's a passage in the Bible, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't give you the citation, but God said, a time is coming, says the Lord, when I will write my law on their hearts, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. And to paraphrase, no longer will anyone have to tell anyone else what God is about. The laws of the church, the rules and the regulations in order to get to heaven, all of the things that organized religion has laid on us will be a thing of the past if we realize that we have an immediate access to the mystical. And we do have an immediate access to the mystical. And these NDEs and out-of-body experiences prove it. Now, not everybody has to go through an NDE or an OBE in order to understand that. But if enough people were willing to share their experiences, we would be in an entirely different place. One of the things that religion clings to is this need to feel that if you're not a member of this religion, you're not going to heaven. If you're a member of that religion, you're going to hell. If you don't pray in this form or that form, if you don't wear certain clothes, eat certain foods, do this, don't do that, that your life is going to be limited to you may be consigned to hell would be the worst scenario. And so we bicker about these things when really the message that the near-death experiencer comes back with is when we die, if we have a good heart, we are going to see God. We're going to see the light. We're going to see an ocean of love pour down on us. That's not to say that there isn't evil in the world, but it is to say that no matter what religion you believe in, no matter what or don't believe in, no matter what your calling, what your aspirations, if you have a good heart, the Pope Francis said back in May, I believe, that even atheists, if they have a good heart, he'll see them on the other side. Where does that come from? Where does that understanding come from? It comes from I think he's got an understanding that religion is not the final answer, that religion is only a step in the process toward the mystical experience. Churches are very wary, very shy of mystical experience. Take, for instance, the movie Heaven is for Real, how that congregation reacted so violently to the notion that on his own a little boy could see Jesus. We have to understand that these things are above and beyond the religious orders of the day. That they go past ritual, that they go past ceremony, that they go past even things like confession, communion, forgiveness. They are gifts freely given. And even as David, for instance, was chosen by God, even though he was a sinner, even though he had murdered and seduced and done some terrible things, God loved him because he loved God. And so the whole thing comes down to this basis of love. It comes down to this grounding in love, this possibly even a physical field like gravity that could be described in terms that we would consider that we would call love. I'll tell you two experiences I've had as a chaplain. One of them was very scary, and one was very beautiful. And I think that's a good idea of where love fits into the picture. I'll tell you the scary one first. The scary one was, there was a man who he was dying of cancer. He was in terrible pain. He was angry, and his family was distraught. They were crying. Some were screaming. There was this desperate tone in the room when I came in. I tried to calm them down. I tried to say prayers. They would have none of it. And at the moment when this man died, I felt this cold, icy chill run through me. I felt nauseated. And I excused myself. I had to leave the room. I don't know that they even noticed that I was leaving. They were so upset themselves. And I went out into the hallway, and I stood there, and I said, "You can't come in here." This man was so desperate to live that he was trying to take over my body. He was trying to force my soul out and push his soul in, which is something that just doesn't work, but it was his last desperate attempt. I told him he had to leave. I told him to look for the light. I don't know if that's what he did. I expect he might be one of those strange spirits that travels through the world trying to get their bearings, trying to understand what death is all about, and trying to finally reconcile with the light. And this is, to my way of thinking, life on this planet as a spirit might be a form of, I won't call it hell, but I'll call it purgatory, because purgatory really describes it. It's a waiting room. It's a waiting room for the blessings of grace, of God's forgiveness, of perhaps just a recognition of the light to come through. There was a board member for IANS. He had to resign recently, but he teaches a course in New York called whereby he teaches people how to have out-of-body experiences. And one of the things they do, he told me, is this sort of missionary work where they go out, they meditate, they leave their bodies, they go into the spirit realm, and in the spirit realm you will find people who are addicted to the planet, addicted to a person, confused, frightened. Some people who were addicted to alcohol, for instance, might be standing in a bar. He said your spirit can go into a bar, and there you'll see people drinking, standing at the bar, lifting a drink. Right next to them will be someone who is lifting a glass, and they will be imitating that gesture out of their own addiction. We can get Cherylee on the line now, and that's wonderful. And I'm going to have to tell you the good experience some other time. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Cherylee, are you there?
Please?
Hi. Well, let's start here, and I'll tell you what we'll do. We will continue next week with a full discussion. But right now, I'm getting a little feedback from your voice, so I'm just going to well, let me start with this, because this is what I was going to talk to you about when we were first going to start. I was going to say that you live in Ottawa, And there was national news last week, of course, over the terrorist shooting of Corporal Cirillo. And when these days when someone dies like that, and of course I encounter death in the hospital all the time, I find myself dwelling not only on their death, but on the journey of their soul. It's like it's a package deal. It's not just them dying and that's, the end. And I don't know, I was going to ask you if you think about death that way when you hear of something like that, some tragedy like that.
I do. I think, it's such a senseless thing. And I know you can kind of look at these questions as if, there's this higher meaning that we just don't understand while we're here. But on the other hand, there were things that were done when he died. I'm so proud to be a Canadian in many ways, because when Corporal Cirillo was shot, people ran to his aid despite the fact that there was a gunman walking around Parliament Hill. And one of the people who came to his aid, she was talking to him as a number of other people were giving him CPR. And they did everything they could to save this young man's life. And, the things that she talked to him about while he was dying was, first of all, she told him that, his family was proud of him. Canadians were proud of him. He was doing a job that was important. And then, she also said, and you're not alone. Look, we're all here for you. Your family is here for you. Canadians are here for you. And the third thing she said to him was, and you really have to know that you're a loved person. We love you and your family loves you. And, for anyone to leave this world with those three messages is really powerful. I know people have tried to politicize this incident in the news in so many, various ways, but really, I think the important thing is the fact that he left the world knowing those three things. And everybody should have that.
Yes. One of the things that keeps people from having a good death experience, basically, is when people are weeping and saying, family members telling them, don't die, you can't leave me here alone, I can't live without you. All of these things just are so heartbreaking to someone who's really ready to die, and it holds them back. I started to talk about a bad experience I had as a chaplain, a good experience I had as a chaplain. The good experience was totally as the result of a family that just was so with this person and so faithful that they knew he was going to heaven, he would be with God, and everything was right with the world, even in this death, which was, of course, breaking their hearts at the same time.
Yeah, I know. A friend of mine passed away of breast cancer a number of years ago, and she was one of the first people I ever talked to about my near-death experience before I even actually knew it had a name. And, the reason we could talk was because, I had been to where she's already, I've already been where she's going. Yes. And so, she said that it was nice that she could talk in a happy way about the fact that she was going to die. And she was sad to leave her family. She was, 42 years old, and she had her first grandchild already. And it was like she crammed an awful lot of life into the years she had here.
Wow.
She was the first one of us to get married, and, first one to kiss a boy. And, she did everything way before I was ready to do those things. And, she was a grandma when she died, and she said she kind of bartered with the universe that she wanted to stick around until she made sure the situation with her teenage daughter and her grandson were sorted out to the point where she felt comfortable leaving. But she said that it was so frustrating for her because her family couldn't even acknowledge that she was going to die. And she knew she was going to die. The doctors knew she was going to die. All they were doing at that point was treating the pain issues that she was experiencing. They really couldn't do anything to treat the cancer. And it was so nice for her just to kind of talk about her experiences. I mean, she was seeing her father who had deceased. She was having all these experiences that were really wonderful to her. Like, you know, as she got closer to that point, she had a real sense of what, you know, there were good things to come. And she couldn't really talk about that with her family. So, you know, it was nice for me because that was the first person I was ever able to talk to that I could say nice things. Because, you know, when I talk about my near-death experiences, people always focus on the fact that, you know, I was in a car accident and almost died and I was injured horribly. And they look at all those things. When I think of it, all I think about was that it was this wonderful experience.
Tea with your grandmother.
Yes, tea with my grandmother. Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, to me, that was the experience. And yet, you know, and it was the same with my friend Patty, where she was having really spiritually healing experiences, despite the fact that her body was in terrible shape. Mm-hmm. But spiritually, she just got brighter and brighter as she got, you know, closer to the end of her life. And she told me once that, you know, she lived for everybody else, but dying was something she was doing for herself. And she had great expectations of it. You know, she had lived a very, very difficult life. You know, had an abusive childhood and, nobody was ever really there for her, but she was always forgiving everybody. She always had time for everybody. And yet things in life were not particularly kind to this individual. And yet she was such a wonderful person. And so, you know, she kind of said that she did all that while she was here. Dying was something that was for her, that she was going to go see the universe.
And also, she was preparing herself for a good death. If she was that giving and that forgiving in this life, I mean, she was really spiritually ready for that next adventure. Yeah, that's very nice.
One of the experiences she had, actually, while I was there, she had seen her father, and her father, while he was alive, had been somewhat abusive to her as a child. Mm-hmm. And she forgave him when he showed up. She was happy to forgive him for what had happened when she was a child.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Cherylee, this has been the shortest interview that I've ever done, but I
should have tried earlier.
Are you free next Monday?
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, let's get the right number. I'll talk to you off the air, and we'll know for sure how to reach you. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because I really want to examine in some detail the place that research is in all of this, because we really need to start getting some serious research done on the miracles of the NDE. Well, folks, thank you, Cherylee, for being with us briefly today, and we are definitely out of time. I want to thank Cherylee for coming on regardless of my blundering on the number. And if you'd like to listen again to this or any of our past shows, and I would certainly recommend the January 27th and February 3rd shows in which I interviewed Cherylee before, just so you'll be up to speed next Monday. Just go to our website at nderadio.org, and for more information about the work of IANDS, check out their website, iands.org. Tune in next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Whitting saying thanks for listening.